The classroom aboard the Horizon was silent, an odd stillness hanging in the air, as if every student were bracing for something. Professor Zelek stood at the front, his long limbs perfectly still, his metallic skin shimmering under the artificial lights. He was an alien from the Andromeda system, a diplomat by trade, and his ability to maintain control over this diverse group of young warriors was nothing short of impressive. Today's lesson was supposed to be a peaceful discussion on intergalactic warfare tactics, a chance for these young minds to absorb information and test their theories. But as usual, it didn't take long for things to take a more dangerous turn. Prince Hadrik Valor, heir to the Thraxian Empire, broke the silence first. His voice was calm, cold, and dripping with superiority. "Earth Marines," he said, his tone laced with a sharp, dismissive edge. "I've read reports on your so-called victories in the Zorak War. Impressive for an underdeveloped species, no doubt, but ultimately, primitive. Do you really believe you can compete with a race like the Thraxians?" A ripple ran through the room. The other students shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The Thraxians were known for their advanced technology and centuries of unbroken dominance in the galaxy. To challenge them, especially in such a direct manner, was a risky move, even for someone like Hadrik. Nat Greyson, the lone Earth Marine in the class, felt her muscles tense. She'd heard this rhetoric before, alien arrogance wrapped in superior technology. But she wasn't one to back down, not now, not ever. She straightened in her seat, her dark eyes locking with Hadrik's. "You clearly don't know what you're talking about," Nat said, her voice steady but laced with a quiet fire. "The Earth Marines have never needed fancy technology to win battles. We've survived on strategy, adaptability, and sheer willpower. We're the ones who fought the Zoraks to the ground, not because we had the best weapons, but because we knew how to fight smarter, harder." Hadrik raised an eyebrow, his smirk never faltering. "And that's your argument? Brute force? You think a few thousand humans with guns and explosives can outmatch centuries of Thraxian warfare? You've never seen true combat, Marine. The Thraxian way is precise, calculated, an art, not a reckless charge." Nat's jaw clenched. She had heard this before. Time and again, she'd heard the same rhetoric from races who thought their centuries of history made them invincible. Hadrik was no different, but she wouldn't let his arrogance slide. "I don't need to charge recklessly," Nat replied, her voice cool but cutting. "I know exactly what it takes to win a fight, and I don't need your centuries of experience to tell me otherwise. One Earth Marine doesn't just fight for survival. We fight to win. And we do it alone if we have to." The room went still again, the tension thickening. Hadrik's eyes narrowed, his expression hardening into a cold mask. He was not used to being challenged, especially not by a human. "You really think you're the exception, don't you?" Hadrik asked, his voice low and dangerous. "Let's say your marine tactics are as good as you claim. What happens when you face an enemy that doesn't need to play by your rules? What happens when you're outmatched in every way?" "I don't play by rules," Nat answered quietly, her voice unwavering. "I make them." For a moment, Hadrik said nothing. Then, his lips curled into a smile, one that was more sneer than smile. "I'm intrigued," he said, his gaze turning toward Professor Zelek. "Perhaps it's time to test your tactics for real, Marine. I'd like to see just how effective Earth's finest really are. What do you say, Professor? Shall we make this interesting?" Professor Zelek had been watching the exchange with mild interest, but the mention of a test caught his attention. He knew better than to let his students engage in anything too dangerous, but he also understood the importance of allowing them to prove their theories. He paused for a moment, his large black eyes glinting as he assessed the situation. "Very well," he said, his voice even. "You both wish to prove your points. A combat simulation should give us a clear answer. I will authorize a series of simulated battles between you two. You will each choose your weapons, your tactics, and your terrain. We will see, once and for all, if the Earth Marine truly lives up to her reputation." The class buzzed with excitement, some eager to see how this rivalry would play out, others unsure if they were about to witness something they shouldn't. But the die was cast, and neither Nat nor Hadrik could back down now. "We'll meet in the simulation chamber in 30 minutes, Hadrik said, standing with a flourish. "Prepare yourself, Marine. I won't be going easy on you." "I wouldn't want it any other way," Nat replied coolly. Her heart was beating faster now, but not from fear. No, this was excitement. There was no way she was going to let some arrogant prince think he could best her in combat. As the students filed out of the classroom, whispers of the upcoming duel spread like wildfire. Some thought Nat had no chance against the mighty Thraxian prince. Others were betting on the Marine's gritty determination and unyielding spirit. But one thing was clear, this battle would be a turning point for both races. Nat walked toward the simulation chamber, her mind already running through strategies. She'd been through tougher challenges than this. This was just another day for a Marine. But as she glanced over her shoulder, she could feel the weight of Hadrik's gaze on her. The prince might have underestimated her, but she knew exactly what it meant to be Earth's best. She was ready to prove him wrong. The simulation chamber was cold, the air sterile and mechanical. White lights blinked overhead, casting harsh shadows across the sleek, metallic walls. Nat stood at one end of the arena, her pulse steady, her breathing controlled. Across from her, Prince Hadrik loomed, his posture perfect, his eyes locked onto her with that same superior glint that had made her blood boil in the classroom. "Ready to see how Earth's finest measure up?" Hadrik asked, his voice laced with condescension. His fingers brushed the side of his combat suit, adjusting the holographic display projected onto his forearm. The armor was pristine, a work of alien craftsmanship, sleek and unyielding. Nat didn't answer at first. She didn't need to. Her hands flexed at her sides, fingers curling around the hilt of her combat knife. She wasn't interested in his fancy tech. She'd come here to prove that Earth's Marines didn't need luxury to fight. What they had was a mind, a body, and the drive to survive, and she was going to show Hadrik just that. The simulation system activated with a low hum, projecting a holographic landscape in the center of the chamber. It began to form, starting with a barren desert and quickly transforming into a rocky, mountainous terrain. The ground beneath their feet shifted slightly, simulating the uneven surface of the rocky plains. A soft chime echoed through the chamber, signaling the start of the simulation. "You may begin," Professor Zelik's voice crackled over the intercom. The tone was neutral, but even he seemed to be holding his breath. Hadrik didn't hesitate. His hands moved quickly, and with a few taps on his wrist, a series of energy blasters materialized in his hands. The energy hum of the blasters filled the air, their power seemingly infinite. "I'll make this quick," he said with a sneer, raising one of the blasters. Nat's eyes narrowed. She had trained for situations like this. She wasn't going to let his advanced tech distract her. She crouched low, sliding behind a rock formation, eyes scanning the area. Her marine instincts took over, every sense heightened, every step calculated. "I hope you're ready," Hadrik called out, his voice carrying through the desert. "I won't show mercy just because you're a Marine." The air shimmered as the first blast from his energy weapon streaked toward her position. Nat moved fast, ducking just as the energy blast struck the boulder she had been hiding behind, disintegrating it in a burst of light. She didn't waste time. A human Marine wasn't a sitting duck. She sprinted across the rocky terrain, using the landscape to her advantage, her boots kicking up dust. Her breath came in steady, controlled bursts, her mind already working through the options. She had to get close. The blasters were powerful, but the Thraxians didn't have the same training in close combat. They relied on their advanced technology, and that was exactly where she could beat them. A soft whirring sound echoed from above. Nat looked up just in time to see Hadrik's cloak drone, a small, nearly invisible speck in the sky, circling. He was using every trick in his arsenal. But she had tricks of her own. She slid into a low crouch behind a massive rock, adjusting the interface on her wrist. The marine tech wasn't as sleek as the Thraxians, but it was deadly in its own right. A soft ping sounded from her wrist communicator, signaling the activation of a jammer. She wasn't going to let Hadrik's drone stay above her for long. The drone's buzzing faltered, and then, with a burst of static, it plummeted from the sky, crashing into the ground with a dull thud. Nat smiled to herself. That was one problem down. As she moved forward, Hadrik's voice echoed across the desert again. You think you're clever? I've only just started. Before she could react, a surge of energy flared in her peripheral vision. Hadrik had activated a secondary energy blaster, one designed to track and target. The blast came at her from an unexpected angle, but Nat was already moving. She ducked low, the blast narrowly missing her by inches as it struck the rocks behind her. She rolled forward, closing the distance between them. She had one chance. Hadrik was too busy adjusting his weapons to notice her approach. She was nearly on him. A quick flash of movement, and she was at his side. Her combat knife, sharp and well-balanced, glinted in the harsh desert light as she brought it forward in a swift arc. The blade hummed as it sliced through the air, aiming for the energy pack attached to his belt. Hadrik's eyes widened, but he was quick. He moved back just in time to avoid the strike, but not fast enough. The knife grazed his side, cutting through his armored suit, drawing a thin line of blood. You, Hadrik snarled, his eyes burning with anger. You actually think you can defeat me with that? Without waiting for a response, he leaped backward, his hands manipulating his wrist display again. Within seconds, his suit hummed with energy, and a shield flickered into place around him. A defensive barrier, designed to block physical attacks. Impressive, Nat muttered, her lips curling into a smirk. The shield was strong, but she wasn't out of options. She knew that Hadrik's pride, his overconfidence, would be his downfall. The shield wouldn't protect him forever. She wasn't finished yet. In one fluid motion, Nat sprinted forward, using the cover of a nearby ridge to hide her approach. Hadrik had no idea where she was. His shield flickered, a small gap opening near his right side, just enough for her to exploit. With a burst of speed, Nat launched herself toward him, her knife raised. In that split second, Hadrik realized too late that he'd underestimated her. The knife struck the side of his shield, but instead of bouncing off, it slid through a small weak point. The blade sunk deep into the energy core, and in a split second, a shockwave exploded outward, knocking both of them off their feet. Nat scrambled to her knees, panting, her heart racing. She had done it. Hadrik was disarmed, his shields failing, and his tech was fried. For a moment, all that remained was the sound of their breathing, the echo of the energy blast still lingering in the air. Hadrik groaned, pulling himself upright, his face pale from the sudden impact. He stared at her, disbelief in his eyes. You actually did it," he muttered. Nat stood tall, looking down at him with a quiet smile. "I told you, Prince. Earth Marines don't need technology to win. We fight with everything we have." She extended her hand to help him up. "Consider this lesson number 1. Hadrik hesitated, then took her hand. "You've earned my respect, Marine," he said, his voice softer, more humbled than before. The battle wasn't over, but the lesson was clear. Earth had its own kind of power. And no matter how advanced the technology, that power could never be underestimated. The room was quiet, too quiet. A palpable tension hung in the air aboard the Horizon. The final test had been set into motion, a real-world peace negotiation, a mission that would require both brains and brawn. It was the perfect battleground for Nat and Prince Hadrik. As much as they had clashed in combat, their next challenge would test something much deeper: strategy, diplomacy, and perhaps, understanding. Nat stood in front of the holographic projection table, adjusting her uniform as she surveyed the situation. She had been briefed on the mission's goals: a mock peace treaty between two warring planets, the Galleon and the Ret, who had been embroiled in a bloody conflict for decades. The Ret were a technologically advanced race, while the Galleon had a more primitive approach, relying on sheer numbers and guerrilla tactics. Both were on the brink of annihilating each other, and Earth had been called to mediate the talks. She glanced at Hadrik, who stood across the room, his expression unreadable. His presence was a stark reminder of what was at stake. "You ready, Marine?" Hadrik's voice was cool, but there was an underlying edge to it. He wasn't just playing for his people's honor now. There was something personal in his challenge. He wanted to beat her, and he wanted to do it by any means necessary. Nat nodded, a small but determined smile tugging at her lips. "Let's get this over with." Professor Zelek's voice echoed through the intercom, cutting through the silence. "Both teams, you are to begin immediately. The stakes are high. Fail in your negotiations, and the war could escalate into a galaxy-wide conflict. Begin." With a wave of his hand, Hadrik activated the holographic screen in front of him. The room shifted, the projection table now showing the layout of the Gallian and Ret territories, each with detailed information on resources, military positioning, and civilian zones. Nat tapped the controls, syncing her data. Her approach was simple: gather as much intelligence as possible and use that information to craft a deal both sides would accept. But the real challenge was getting through to the Ret, a people who didn't value diplomacy the same way Earth or Thraxians did. Hadrik, on the other hand, was already at work. His eyes flickered over the data, his hands moving with precision as he analyzed the Ret's military infrastructure. It was clear that his focus was on their weaknesses, something he planned to exploit. He had no interest in negotiation, only victory. And Nat knew it. The question was, how would she approach this? Should she be the idealistic diplomat, or the pragmatist, willing to sacrifice some ideals for the sake of peace? The Gallian representative, a burly figure with a broad green face, appeared on the screen, his expression gruff. "You Earthlings have been sent to broker peace? After all these years, you think you can end this war?" His voice was harsh, laced with years of anger. Nat stepped forward, her posture confident but open. "We've seen your pain, Gallian," she said, her voice steady but firm. "We understand the weight of your suffering. But war doesn't fix wounds, it only deepens them. This isn't about one side winning, it's about both sides surviving." The Gallian's eyes narrowed, but he remained silent, clearly waiting for something more. Nat could feel the pressure mounting, but she didn't back down. She was used to being underestimated. She had been underestimated her whole life, but that had never stopped her before. Prince Hadrik, on the other hand, stood in the background, his eyes narrowing as the conversation progressed. He had been quiet, but his mind was clearly racing. He didn't understand Earth's approach to diplomacy, it was too soft, too idealistic. He was used to the Thraxian way: power, domination, and conquest. His silence spoke volumes, but it wasn't until Nat made a strategic move that Hadrik's resolve began to crack. "We understand that the Red are fighting because they believe it's their only way to survive," Nat continued, looking directly at the Gallian representative. "But there are ways to preserve your culture and protect your people without continuing this endless cycle of bloodshed. We offer a treaty. A way out. And Earth can help." A flicker of interest crossed the Gallian's face, but Hadrik cut in sharply. "Enough, Marine. You're wasting time." He turned to the Gallian. "You think peace is your answer? You're too weak. The Red are not like your people. They won't respect peace, they respect power." The words were out before he could stop them, and in that moment, Nat saw the chink in his armor. Hadrik wasn't here for peace. He was here to dominate, to show that Thraxians were the true leaders. And that was where he was wrong. It wasn't about domination. It was about survival. And Earth had learned that lesson better than anyone. Before Hadrik could continue, Nat leaned forward, her voice sharp. "Hadrik, this isn't a game of who's stronger. It's about saving lives. I don't care about Thraxian pride. I care about the future." The Gallian representative's expression softened slightly. For a moment, the tension in the room broke, just a little. "You speak with conviction, Earthling. But conviction won't stop the Ret. What's your plan?" Nat didn't hesitate. "We'll offer them a way to save face. We'll acknowledge their history, their strength. We'll show them that they don't have to destroy the Gallian to preserve their identity. We'll use Earth's military expertise to protect both sides until they're strong enough to maintain peace on their own. They don't want to be subjugated, but they need the assurance that they won't be wiped out. The Gallian was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. It's a bold proposal. But, his gaze shifted to Hadrik, who had been fuming silently in the background. It may be the only one left. Hadrik opened his mouth to argue, but for the first time, he hesitated. The weight of the situation hit him. His pride had blinded him. Nat had shown him something he hadn't seen before, humility and the ability to look past his own ego for the greater good. Finally, Hadrik spoke, his voice low but measured. Fine. But mark my words, Marine, if this fails, I will not hesitate to finish it the Thraxian way. Nat stood tall, unfazed. Understood. But we'll make sure it doesn't fail. The room fell silent once more, the tension hanging heavy. But this time, there was a subtle shift in the air. Hadrik had been forced to face the reality of his own limitations. He wasn't invincible, and his people weren't infallible. Nat had proven that. The final moments of the simulation played out in silence, as the treaty was signed, a fragile hope hanging in the balance. But as the mission ended, Nat couldn't help but feel a small victory. Not just for Earth, but for the galaxy. In the end, it wasn't about who had the most power. It was about understanding that peace, though difficult, was always worth fighting for. And for once, Prince Hadrik didn't argue.